With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. I'm Michael Thompson with my brothers on the adventure, on the journey, Greg Saylors and S.J. Jennings, and David Burnett's back with us to continue the exploration of the masculine journey. And we are going to dive into the fundamental, foundational, bedrock beginnings of boyhood and what it looks like to enter into the stage, or for us, go back to the stage of boyhood, and what went well, what didn't go well, what should have happened in this stage. And so, you guys ready? Let's jump in. Boyhood. It's the first decade, 0 to 10, maybe a little bit later. It's a stage of belovedness. I mean, that word is huge, Greg. You asked off camera, are we going to talk about belovedness? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is
my favorite.
This is the stage in a boy's life when that's really all that matters, is being loved. And when I say that, I mean being provided for, being protected, being given an environment where he really is the center of attention. There's counterparts to this for girls, girlhood, but the early years of a boy's life, that's really, really important, that he has a environment that his questions, his core heart's questions can be answered. And those core questions are, do you see me?
Do you like what
and
you
do
see?
you like what you see?
Yeah.
Or do you delight in me? Do you want me? Those are just huge. And I'm not sure we fully grow out of those questions.
You've often mentioned about your times with your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think my dad did a number of,
as an adult,
a number of good answers to those questions, and even later in my life. But so many boys, it just goes south so quickly, so early. And we want to explore that a little bit, be sensitive to that. You ever remember the show Wonder Years?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Kevin, the Wonder Years, this is boyhood. Elementary school, how having buddies, having friends. I remember you guys knocking on friends' doors. Could Greg come out and play? I don't think kids do that as much anymore, with
they usually text each other.
And stuff like that. But,
Snapchat
we used to play. I mean, the neighborhood was a playground.
Yep.
And that's a little bit later in boyhood, but even earlier at 4, 5, 6, those first birthday parties, those gatherings of friends, classmates in kindergarten, in first grade, second grade. It's a long ways to go back for some of us to remember. But those questions are really powerful. Do you see me? Do you like what you see? Do you want to be with me? And that's the cry of a boy's heart. That's the hope of a boy's heart. Am I seen? Am I wanted? Am I valuable? Am I prized? And there's a whole lot of life that gets built on that, however that goes.
Right.
It's foundational, right?
I got 4 boys, but 3 of them that are in this stage right now. One that's kind of graduating into the stage we talked about last time, the Ranger stage. And as my 19-month-old, almost coming into 2 now, he's like the personification of that at that age.
Yeah, watch.
Oh, my goodness.
Watch me.
So the first moment, I'm like, no. We call him, his name's Joshua, but his nickname is Bean. So we call him Bean. All right, Bean, I'm sorry, buddy, I can't right now. He doesn't know what I'm talking about, and there's tears right away.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, son,
Yeah, there's a...
do you see me?
The term that's being used a lot, and probably should be used a lot to diagnose and to bring things to the forefront in adulthood, is narcissism.
Right.
But when you're a boy, when you're a little one like this, it's okay.
It's permission
for
to
you
be a
to think that the whole world revolves around you.
Right.
That's
because
right.
it does.
Yeah.
It does.
In so many ways.
In so many ways. There's a secure foundation in that.
That's right.
I think the narcissism that comes later is the insecure
Absolutely.
of a foundation that didn't go well.
Right.
It's just a theory.
Yeah, that's a good theory.
And he feels
I think.
so entitled as the youngest, and 4, so we're all cuddled, kind of watching a movie this weekend on the couch, and where does he want to be?
In the middle.
In the middle.
Yeah.
He's going to crawl up in my lap, and he's going to push his other brothers out of the way because he believes that that's his spot.
Well, if we see, Joseph, right, in the coat of many colors, the beloved son. Yeah, it didn't go well when he was bragging about his coat. I don't know that he said nanny, nanny, boo, boo, but, look what I got.
Yeah.
We'll show you.
I think too, David, this is a stage where the boy doesn't really even know. He doesn't have any other environments to compare it to. He doesn't know how provided or protected. Bean doesn't know. He just either enjoys it or he's not.
He feels it when he doesn't get it because
right?
he's used to getting it. Yeah.
But it really is, as fathers, if you're a young father, this is a stage where you want to answer that question. I see you. I delight in you. And yes, there's times to learn appropriateness. But if the answer to the boy all the time is no, stop, quit, get down, I don't have time, that leaves a mark.
It does.
And I think there's time to unravel the narcissism, right? When we transition from boyhood to ranger, that is a hard transition. I love that you said it's a transition from, okay, son, you're not the center of the universe. You were, but you're not. I want to move you into a larger universe where it doesn't orbit around you, but you become part of this family in a different way. That's a huge transition at 8, 9, and 10. And it doesn't go very well. Most of the transitions don't, because you're leaving for 7, 8 years, a decade of trying to find your way in that stage to the next stage. No, I'm not going to cut your meat. You need to, let me show you.
Learn how to hold a knife.
Let me show you how to cut your, and by the way, this knife is sharp. That's a transition into ranger stage. Sharp things, heavy things, carrying things, physical. But a lot of things are done for you at this boyhood stage. And provision and protection, you're the most unaware of them as to define them. But like you said, Greg, you're aware of them if you're experiencing them or not. And there's a lot of going with and being with. A boy in the boyhood stage, right? They come and grab your hand. Come with me. And I'm talking about 3, 4, and 5. They want you to watch. They want you to get in the bunk bed. They want you to get in the box. They want you to be with them. So your physical presence is huge in the boyhood stage as a dad. And as a boy, having your dad's physical presence, time, huge, right? Another great part of this stage that hopefully it went well, tuck in. Yeah. I mean, to be read to be told stories, to be prayed with, all of those things begin at such a young age.
They're so important. And physical touch, I think, is another thing that men might shy away from a little bit, but wrestling with those boys, I've been doing something with my boys for a lot of years. It's kind of slamming them on the bed. We call it, for some reason, it got named throwing them to the chickens. I don't know why it's called that.
Hey, Dad, you come in, Dad, throw me to the chickens. Throw me to the chickens.
Exactly.
They want it.
On my shoulder.
Yeah,
boom, on the bed or the couch.
What kind of stories are you telling about chickens? That you're being, instead of thrown to the lions, you're being thrown to the chickens.
I don't know where the chicken, but it's affectionately called that now. Yeah. It's stuck.
No, I remember many times when my son was little, I would put both of his feet in the palm of my hand and have him stand in my hand. And
we got pictures of that.
Yeah.
We got 8mm movies with my dad doing that with my brother.
That was the Dark Ages, friends.
Yes, I don't have a picture of it, but I will never forget the look on Sherry's face, my wife's face, when she would come around the corner and we were doing that. Because of course we're too close to the brick mantle in the den, and just chucking him over my shoulders and throwing him up on the couch and wrestling around with him.
Oh, on your shoulders. I used to mow the lawn with my girls on my shoulders. They would take turns. It was a workout.
Yeah.
But we have pictures of that, I mean, that boyhood, girlhood stage.
Yeah.
I love the idea of having physical touch, wrestling, sitting in the lap of your dad, protection.
Right, reading books or
watching something together, listening to something together.
Falling asleep to football with him on my chest.
Yeah. Right. That's belovedness. That's being loved. And the boyhood stage is all about that, all about being loved. I think this is also a stage where, back to the narcissism, I think about the gifts of time, the gifts of presence, and then maybe even the gift of unwrapping presence. There's a delight in that. Surprises, taking your son, beloved daughter, taking them with you places. I mean, even in the grocery, you can have a great time with your young one.
Oh, yeah. He used to want to come with me everywhere. Go to the dump. We'd load up the pickup truck. I mean, I'm taking the trash. But he just wanted to ride in the pickup truck.
I know David's dad, he was a tool man, bring him in. But I can remember we had sets of little miniature rakes and shovel. I mean, they were plastic. They didn't really work, but Dad had the big stuff. And there we were, a couple boys just following Dad around, throwing things in wheelbarrows. He's doing the heavy lifting, but we're there. We're engaged. Those are big.
And he's got to go around behind us, right?
Yeah. We didn't know that.
No, we didn't know it then. But as a dad, you learn that, right?
Right.
Yeah, my dad, like you said, Michael, he sold Snap-on tools, and that's one of the memories I have is going to work with him, going around to the different mechanic shops and garages. And I used to love to just have you remember those little rags that the mechanics had, the little,
little red rags?
Yeah, I used to always want one in my back pocket. You know how they'd have them hanging out, and just kind of feel like I was one of those guys and get my hands greasy, and that kind of stuff. That was a good memory. And
So if that's the good stuff, right, then you know what the bad stuff is in this stage.
Yeah.
When those things aren't happening, don't happen, you're not invited, you don't get included, or you're a burden to take to the store. Even in a very young age, we can think that they don't see it. We can think that they don't hear it, our tone, when we're talking to our wife about.
Or the little sigh we let out. They hear those things.
I mean, it's such a bad mistake. And I know there's two of the men here have been through divorces, and SJ, he remarried the woman that he divorced. David,
she remarried me.
Yeah.
She married me twice.
We're still trying to figure that out. That's a good one.
Divorce didn't work out.
That's right. That's right.
But I think that it's probably one of the greatest underestimations I hear from men that I counsel, work with, talk to, and sharing with, who are going through that. I don't think it was your story, David. I think you really, really were very concerned about what your daughters were feeling and hearing. But no, they're not resilient. That should never be the answer. Oh, the kids are doing great.
Yeah.
They're resilient.
They're really tough.
No, they're not.
No.
And I'm not trying to indict those who are in that place. I'm not saying that, moms and dads. I'm not. What I'm saying, hopefully I'm provoking you to an invitation of assume that they're not good.
Right.
Assume that there's
something to talk about.
An enemy who has come to whisper to them, it's their fault. If they had cleaned their room, if they had made better grades, if they had obeyed more, that's the kind of crazy stuff we hear more of later.
Right, when the guy's 45 years old.
How he interpreted that file at boyhood or at the ranger stage. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago that my older daughter, Gabby, had shared with us that she only remembered, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times that were good times between her birth mom and me, which is pretty sad, but it's indicative to what they remember.
And I'm sure you told her that's not true. Stop saying stuff like that.
That's right.
Well,
let me tell you what happened.
Some of that stuff was probably true.
But that it's great intel when they, in a later stage, when they share with us the memories they have. I mean, we learned a lot about our girls in their 20s talking about how they experienced girlhood. Even as a dad now, this masculine journey might be a great idea to revisit what happened. What was growing up like for you?
You got to be in a pretty oriented place to ask that question to your kids.
Yeah, they might say, "Why do you ask?"
Yeah,
like, what do you want?
But be prepared for the way you remember their childhood is different from the way that they remember their childhood.
My brothers and I have sat around and talked about same trips, same story, and had different interpretations of the same place, same moment. But it's the opportunity to go back and not correct, but to listen and engage could be good. Because if somehow their question wasn't answered or it was answered badly, were they seen? Were they delighted in? Were they wanted? If for some reason their answer is anything but yes, even years later, this is why we're having this conversation, right, men, about the masculine. You can go back.
That's right.
And bring some remedy, bring some recovery, and not by correcting or explaining or justifying, but by legitimizing, by listening, by saying, I bet that was really hard. That's not what I wanted for you. Say it together, sorry.
Yeah.
It's amazing how at this stage, especially when they're younger, their capacity to forgive is off the charts.
So I have a story that just happened, very fresh. Again, my wife, I said in the last episode, was gone out to Colorado.
A couple weeks ago now, yeah.
Yeah. So there's opportunities to have a lot of fun. I told the story about going down the stairs. And there's opportunities for the enemy to partner with me to wound hearts. So it's the 4th night of her being gone. I'm pretty tired, was doing my taxes that day. That night, it's bedtime routine. And we were talking about tucking in and how good that can be. I wasn't in the mood. All right.
Get in bed now.
I was not in the mood. And I just did not handle it well, men. And not quite yelling, but very stern. Let's pray. Here's a kiss on the cheek. Good night. All right, go back downstairs. And then there's an invitation from the enemy. Then there's an invitation from the Lord. And so the invitation from the enemy is what you would expect. You stupid, fill in the blank. Look what you just did to your boy. And I can go to shame and guilt. The invitation from the Lord was, how about you go back up there? It was my 8-year-old, Luke, particularly. And so, I waited strategically for 30 minutes-ish because I knew the younger boy would go on to sleep. And sure enough, go up there. There's some sobs going on. Scoop him up, bring him downstairs, and we talk and we pray. And I'm so sorry. I love you. Let's not see this be this way. That night after he goes back to bed, God prompted me, write him a note, put it on the mirror. Such a good thing. Mirror messages are wonderful, men and ladies. If you've never done mirror messages, do it. But wrote him a message, left it on the mirror. Again, bud, so sorry about last night. So glad we had a chance to talk. Love you. So important. I remember, watching Andy Griffith or some of those other episodes, some of those older shows where the dads actually apologized in the show. Remember that?
Yeah.
Apologies is very important. That's us as the adults now talking about that as the kids. Did you guys get apologies from your dad when you were that age? Do you remember any? I don't remember any.
Yeah, maybe. I'd have to access that file in the moment. I think in the disciplinarian lane, my dad and mom there were some times they were mad. Mad. Your brother's breathing. Your brother's bleeding, and you're.
He's breathing. He's all right.
He's breathing on me.
Yeah, we had some of that in the car.
Yeah.
Don't make me pull this car over.
Don't get my space.
Yeah. But there was enough love to counter some of those heated moments, and I think, Greg, you're bringing up in this stage. Sometimes a boy doesn't feel like he's the beloved son, even for a minute or for a night. The enemy wants to really drive that home with whispers of, you're stupid, your dad loves your brothers. We don't want to underestimate the enemy in any stage that we're fathering and parenting, but don't underestimate the power of even these files in your own storyline. But when boys are arrested with a sense of abandonment or violence or anger, loss, it's just a goldfish sometimes to moms and dads. It's not, they don't see it that way. How can you honor loss for a 4-year-old or 5-year-old? There's a trick. How do you get into that? How do you explore
get another
that?
Goldfish before they notice? Is that what you're supposed to do?
Walk with God.
Walk with God.
Walk with God, right?
That's what TV taught us. That's right. Yeah, the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, there's just a lot, even at this stage, that can get arrested, that can get infiltrated by the enemy. And whether mom and dad were tired or mom and dad were really mad and angry and fighting, little hearts at this stage, our little hearts could feel the weight of some of those moments. And so can, our children. And I think that's unintentional. Like you're saying, that wasn't intentional. But when you realize you did it, Greg.
Yep, that's right.
That's a great lesson. It'd be easier to not go write a note, not go take 30 more minutes, not go. But what if something really significant is on the line? And then when you walk up there and you hear the tears, you hear the sniffles.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah, you're Jesus, thank you for that. Thank you for the prompt.
What a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll speak for myself. I had a tendency to do that when Steve was younger, to minimize some of his hurts and some of what was demonstrated to me, I guess. But things like that, Greg, having to go to bed early or not getting what you wanted or skin knee or that, it was kind of I know not every time, but on many occasions it was, come on, man, just rub some dirt on it or something,
Right. Pull yourself up by
get
your
over
bootstraps.
it. Yeah, man. It's not that big of a deal,
And there's going to be some testing of parental hearts, and there's going to be some challenging by boys and girls of that heart, not eating, doing things that...
Let's not even talk about the eating struggles, Lord.
There's bargaining. There's a lot. I don't want to be insensitive. It's a very target-rich environment for wounding, missing hearts, and how we handle that when we need to be firm, when we need to be more intentional? Are we communicating out of anger? And there are just times I just remember with the girls where the negotiations were over.
Yeah. And so, Michael, I mean, I know we're talking about, the first stage here, boyhood, belovedness. And as we've listened and talked about all these different stages, what an opportunity, obviously, this is to walk with a sage that walks with a king, that walks with a warrior lover, that walks with a ranger and a boy, in being helped with this. I mean, when I had my children, I was in my 20s, my first, and now I was in my 40s with my last. And so it's much different parenting Josh than it was Jackson, because I know a little bit of something. But thankfully, I have men like you, older men like you, to walk with through these things. And so I think it's good for our listeners to remember that all of these things build on each other. And as you said, the foundation of it all is this stage.
I love that you're saying that, Greg, because I want us to talk about for a minute, turn into, you know what the greatest thing I did for my kids' hearts? I went with Jesus after mine.
Amen. That's good.
That's the greatest marital conference I've ever been to that I didn't go to. The greatest parenting conference I've ever been to that I didn't go to. But the restoration of my heart, right? That's why we wrote Heart of a Warrior.
Right.
Was to invite men to go back in their story so they could go forward unencumbered without the wounding messages of all these stages, because it's not just one wound. I mean, in this series, we've literally been talking about what could be accumulatively files of hundreds of times that our hearts took a hit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wounded messages, and then a pattern begins.
Right.
And that's when the false self rises of self-protection, self-promotion. And about that ranger stage, the welding is cooling on that false self-construct, and it's in play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Michael, you wrote in your book, and here in the journal workbook as well, I hope to persuade men to go with God back into their stories to remove whatever things block them from receiving the love of a father from his beloved son.
Mm-hmm.
Then, with their ability to receive Father's love recovered, I hope to instill in men an awareness of the ongoing training required to see disoriented men become oriented. So powerful. Like you're saying, we have to recover what was lost.
I'm going to say this because it keeps coming back up in my head. It occurs to me that when you're in this stage, the boyhood stage, you have the least capacity to communicate out of all the stages.
Yeah.
You're 3 years old. You can't articulate why you're crying or why you're angry. Going back to your son,
Why you're
Greg,
afraid.
why you're afraid, what you're experiencing. You can't articulate those things. So that's a double-edged sword in that. If you're the boy, then you don't know how to communicate what you're saying. There could be frustration there. There could be on your little heart agreements that your dad's frustrated with you now, right? Because you can't tell him what you're thinking or how you're feeling. And then on the other side of it, from the parenting perspective, you can be frustrated with your kid. Just tell me what's wrong. Just what is it?
I'll fix
You
it.
know? Yeah, exactly. And again, confession time, I did that with my kid and I would get frustrated with him. Why can't you just communicate to me? So the importance of going back to this stage and unraveling some of these things and some of these feelings and agreements that you made back then that you couldn't articulate because you were 4 or 5 years old, and giving grace and forgiveness to that little boy who couldn't get out what was on his heart and what was hurting, and talking with him again, bring him back up and releasing some of those things and talking about them with your heavenly Father.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Jay, we'd want our listeners to know it would be a silly assumption to think that you grow out of this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part of me, there is a legitimate part of me that a boyhood part of my heart still resides and is still there. I can be taken at 54, I can be taken into something that feels very ranger stage or boyhood. When I go home or my dad and mom come here, when I encounter them, there are times I can feel like a boy again.
Yeah.
Dad still has an incredible presence.
Power, really.
And power.
Good power.
And no, he doesn't treat me like a boy.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times, Greg, I'm just glad to be with my dad next to him. I know your dad's gone and all 3 of my friends' dads are gone at this table. But yeah, there's times when boyhood, even in my king stage, raises its head, and ranger, adventure. exploration, still learning how to do things at 54 that I didn't know how to do, wasn't taught.
To your point, Michael, when I was thinking about reflecting on these stages again for this podcast, my mind went back to Daniel Boone. Did you ever remember the show Daniel Boone? Did y'all watch it when you were a kid?
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, man, yeah.
That must have been a long
Wes
time ago.
Parker.
I had a coonskin hat.
I had the coonskin hat. I had the coat.
You know how
with the
etched it is in our
fringe.
mind?
Oh,
We
the
could
fringe,
sing
yeah.
the song.
Yeah, Daniel Boone. There you go.
Man.
So
man.
that I went right back there, and I'm hearing this word in my heart: the wonder of that stage. As we were sitting here talking, starting, my mind went to that show, and I couldn't remember the boy's name, and so I looked it up. And do you remember it was Israel?
Yeah.
And do you remember?
Oh, wow. No,
I do.
And I started to remember how Daniel treated Israel. It was a loving relationship. He was a beloved son. And so my mind goes there, and I go back to the wonder of Flipper. I know you remember those shows and the exploring and the adventure of that.
Oh, man. How about Andy Griffith and Opie?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Talk about being beloved, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't always you get to do whatever you want to do, Opie, right? So there were a lot of lessons in there.
The lessons were covered in love. I mean, you knew what the point was and why.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. We're going to take a break and come right back. I want to talk about heroes in the Beloved Son stage. So we'll be right back in just a minute with more of the Exploring More podcast.
Marriage may be the most sacred of all human relationships. Two people coming together as one. There may not be anything more powerful than two people walking with God together. It's kind of mind-boggling, actually. And because of the power and weight of marriage in the kingdom, it should not come as any surprise that marriage is violently opposed. It's a favorite target of the enemy. We believe this is why you don't have to look very far to find a marriage that is in trouble. Assaults on marriage and challenges to marriage are everywhere. But we at Zoweh know there is a way for couples to make a comeback. Learn how to fight back, enjoy being restored, and actually thrive in the midst of day-to-day battles of life. Marriage is worth fighting for, and having the right weapons and tools, training and orientation is crucial. That's why we created the Rendezvous Project, a 12-session video series recorded live during one of our recent Rendezvous Weekend marriage conferences. Through the Rendezvous Project, we hope to empower marriages to either take a weekend away together and host your own marriage retreat, or journey together in a weekly small group, discovering your true heart, the deep and beautiful heart of your marriage, the context of the larger story your marriage is in, and how to walk intimately with God together. For more information about the Rendezvous Project and to stay up to date with the latest news leading up to its release, visit therendezvousproject.com.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. We're talking about boyhood and the masculine journey. And before the break, you brought up Daniel Boone. This is so important. We start to identify with things in boyhood. You look at little boys in Halloween, what they dress up as, right? The superheroes, the astronaut, the cowboy, the policeman. You played cops and robbers. I mean, you played games literally personifying certain identities, you know, and you had to take your turn as good guys and bad guys, right? But you got to take a turn, and it meant what you wore, you know, what you got to get a hold of in the garage, how you played Army, you know, pine cones, and, you know, if you really felt aggressive, it was going to be dirt clods.
Always got a great idea. Let's make this that. Okay.
Yeah. So like Daniel Boone, great idea. You're accessing, David, by bringing that up, just these other identities, personas. I mean, heroes. Who were some of the heroes of our boyhood?
I mentioned it too. This may not be a standout hero, but the show Flipper, and as I'm thinking about it, his dad was a cool dude.
Yeah.
He was like a park ranger or something. But he was always driving around in the boat. I don't forget the little kid's name, but he had his Sandy. He had his own boat. But the father-son relationship was always a really good one, you know, and there was good lessons learned, like you were talking about, SJ.
Yeah.
I mean, those are just huge shows. We watched Lassie. We watched Gentle Ben. We watched Gilligan.
The Dukes of Hazzard.
No, that's older.
That started some other problems.
That's older. But, I remember baseball cards. I remember trading cards,
Yeah,
as a boy. Yeah. Again, there weren't a ton of channels. So you watch the game typically with Dad or Howard Cosell, right? Monday Night Football. And in my generation, I mean, and I remember Sears carried the official license of the NFL. So you could get helmets there.
That was big.
We would play. You would get your team. We'd put those helmets on, and they weren't made for whacking each other. They weren't made for head.
My dad, Michael, was a Braves.
Concussion.
Yeah, concussion. Yeah.
My dad was a big Braves fan, so we grew up TBS back in the day.
Yeah.
They played every game was on TBS, and so I grew up watching the Braves. Dale Murphy back in the day loved.
Oh, they were awful.
Yeah, they were awful, awful. But I loved watching them, and I'll never forget. We got to go to Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, and we sit in center field, and I got to see Dale Murphy within 40 yards from me.
Yep.
Holy cow!
Yeah, helmets. Getting helmet night, and
oh my gosh,
and bats. Yeah,
yeah. I think bobblehead.
Right,
I remember
some people have bobbleheads of themselves. By the way,
I remember the
I've heard that's a thing.
1980 Olympics. And the hockey team beat the Russians for the gold. I mean, I was 10 years old, 9 years old, actually. I don't know why. We watched in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. But, that was the first time I remember feeling really patriotic. And my dad was a very patriotic man and loved his country. But watching those guys win, they were a bunch of knuckleheads. They were college guys. So
that's
it was
what made it one of the greatest.
Absolutely,
gold medals
that
ever.
Moment
maybe the greatest in history. Yeah.
Well, if those guys can do that, anybody can do that, and it was a really important moment. I remember.
Isn't it interesting? Those iconic figures we played. We pretended we'd grab brooms and all of a sudden we're playing hockey in the garage. And
what do you think it offers us, Michael? Why do we do that?
I think we want to get close to that idea of something heroic, somebody winning, somebody making the goal that beat the Russians, the bad guys at the time.
Overcoming evil.
Overcoming evil. I think it was Eldridge years ago that I heard say, boys aren't pretending, they're rehearsing. There's something in us that wants to get close to that.
I think it's in us. I think it's in our DNA that God made us to be heroic.
Yeah. Not all, but a lot of boys, right? Everything's a weapon. A stick is not a stick. It's a sword or a javelin.
We have a few on our walls here.
There's just pine cone is a grenade or a ball. If you don't have a ball, just pitch grenades.
There's some wicked curves with
pine cone. Your ability to pretend and imagine is wonderful at that stage, I hope. Mm-hmm. It's not arrested or stolen from you, but later in life, it is in many ways. It's part of what the enemy wants to come to steal, kill, and destroy is our imagination, our ability. I remember when I was growing up in this stage, we were in Southern California, so there was a lot of adventures. There was a lot of belovedness going places with my family. There was camping, and there was parks, and there was ocean, building things. Right. Putting sand on Dad, burying just a lot of activity that was really good. The Disneyland passes. I mean, there were tickets. You went in and used A, B, C, D, and E tickets.
To see It's a Small World again.
Yeah, but stepping into that, I thought Disneyland was huge.
Right.
Went back as an adult, it's not that big.
Isn't that funny?
It's just not that big. I was shocked.
Yeah. I was back up on the Cape not that long ago and drove by we lived in a couple of places on the Cape, went by the old houses we lived in. And just like that, I remember them being gigantic, and they were probably 1,500 square feet or something. I mean, they were, maybe 1,200. I mean, they just weren't, but they seemed big to me.
Yeah. And the sorrow that some men carry is that as a boy, they didn't get to do any of that or much of that. There wasn't.
Yeah, I was arrested.
There wasn't exploring. There wasn't, for different reasons, they weren't able to be with their dads. They weren't taken along. And some boys were left alone, and isolation. You're on your own came really, really, really early, even in this stage. This is very arresting when a boy feels like he has nobody to turn to. There's nobody there to make things safe.
Right.
So fear enters into the story, and he has to learn how to navigate through that and protect himself. That's a stage that's supposed to be the warrior stage. That's 2 decades later.
Too early,
in your 20s, late teens, early 20s is the warrior, and now you have to be a warrior in your 6. That's arrested development, right? That's that space of yes, you'll need to learn that. But what you didn't get was you're delighted in, you're seen, you're wanted. So to go recover that from Father God, to enter into that. Yeah, even every time you get those files out, they're not misinterpreted. They weren't good.
Mm-hmm.
And the message to your heart wasn't good. So how do you go to God for healing? How do you go, and this is a hard word when you're hurt, especially forgiveness.
Right.
Letting things go.
How do you forgive the people who hurt you? And how do you receive forgiveness for even some of the people that you hurt?
Yeah, I think about a movie that we've turned to many, many times is Braveheart. And when Wallace's dad is killed, he's not far, he's maybe on the edge of this stage. I don't know how old he is. He might be 10.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's a great
12.
story.
And who comes in on the white horse even is Uncle Argyle.
I want a movie
what
about
great...
Uncle Argyle.
Yeah.
Let me just interrupt and say,
come
we
on,
need
Mel
a movie
Gibson.
about Uncle
Where's
Argyle?
the movie about Argyle?
Where'd he get that cape?
That's right.
Yeah, seriously.
That's a good one.
For those of you that haven't seen it, go see the movie, rent the movie. It's probably available on VHS somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Real to real.
When he comes in, he really does. He just scoops William up and says, I'm going to show you how to use this sword, but first I'm going to train your mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a great picture of what Jesus can do for us.
Yeah.
You know, I really see Jesus in that way, being the rescuer, being the one that comes in and scoops us up. Think about where Wallace is at in that moment. His dad's gone. I mean, it's him on the farm. You know what I mean?
I'm good.
He doesn't know Argyle's coming,
That's
right?
Right.
And here he comes in and scoops him up onto his horse and takes him away.
Yeah.
Michael, you wrote a book. A few, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Heart of a Warrior is big in that. Braveheart is big in the Heart of a Warrior book.
I mean, if you look at the cover of the book, if you guys haven't seen it, it actually recreates the ending of Braveheart, where Hamish, right, throws the sword, and there it is. And with what we're talking about, the first 8 chapters, Michael, some people might say redundant. I don't think so. Thorough is about belovedness. And what is the tagline of the book?
Yeah, before you can become the warrior, you have to become the beloved son. And everything you're saying, Greg, about 8 chapters and bringing it up, we know and believe that it's so fundamental,
important,
so foundational to go back and have that worked on by God with his help, giving him access.
Love, such a big word, belovedness.
Belovedness, being loved, being the beloved son.
Right.
If you didn't get that, then that's where the invitation is to go back. How far? I don't know.
As far as it takes.
Yeah.
Father wants it. He desires to be there with you.
And no matter where you land, we've shared some fun stories about being boys and having boys and that being fun. If that's your memory, if your memory is that you didn't get any of that, either way, we want to encourage you to go back into this.
That's right.
I mean, no matter what your interpretation is of your childhood, of your boyhood, this stage in your life, the importance of going back, revisiting some of these things, letting Jesus show you some of these things through his eyes. I mean, we can't overstate the importance of that.
And I think for your heart, these are all stages to help you explore and go with God into your story. And kind of in these incremental places, these decades and how they can go, the transitions. We just said it's all hard. It all has, sooner or later, the battle will catch up to you or you'll find yourself in the battle for the heart. And the other thing that I would encourage our listeners to, David, is how this has helped me see the hearts of others. You know, that guy that just is so timid and he's so quiet, he's kind of shut down, he's unable to engage. I don't think anymore, what's wrong with that guy? No, something in his story happened.
Yeah, what happened to that guy?
What happened to that guy is different than what's wrong with that guy.
That's right.
And when you hear another man's story in light of this masculine journey grid, you start to hear and see, and you can actually help him because you see that he was missed as a boy. They got divorced. He went with his grandparents. They were too old to get engaged in any activity. I mean, I'm making all this up, but this is these storylines of some men who absolutely are so fearful of failing because the ranger stage, they weren't allowed to fail. Or when they did fall, there was nobody there to say, that's okay, buddy. It's all right. Let's try it again. Let me help you. Sooner or later, a man is given the answer. Do I have what it takes? Am I strong? No.
Well, we're fresh off of
No.
Heart of a Warrior Encounter, and we have something we call impact sheets where people write their stories about what happened to me. Some people share what happened to them, but so much of that are the celebration stories. And we are so blessed at Zoweh, and you guys can explore that with us by sending us an email exploringmore@zoweh.org. We'd love to hear your story.
Yeah.
Because there is victory. And if you're not finding victory, like we said a few weeks ago, we'd love to help.
Yeah, because men and women, the line that the enemy wants to drop into your heart and mind is you're on your own.
That's right. Isolation.
You are on your own.
Yeah.
They're not going to be there. They weren't there. You don't know how to do this. You're on your own. And that is part of the masculine journey and feminine journey to recover from living under that. It's like a spell to live under that curse.
I agree with that totally, because that's a challenge that I'm facing right now, is just that very same thing, that I'm not on my own, that God will take care of me. And I love what you said, just kind of in context of the grid, that it does give us a framework to be able to look into not only our stories, but like another man's story, to where you can empathize with what they might be going through. And I love the fact too that it's never too late to go back, and it's worth the work and the effort it takes. Because just like I mentioned in the last podcast, I would never have known that about the Little League story that I shared if God hadn't have taken me back and gone back with me, in that moment. So it's worth it.
I mean, this is so important to us and so important to the journey. I think every boy does dream of one day having a kingdom, one day offering, sharing what he knows, what he's learned. And those in his world are protected, are provided for. So somewhere between 6 and 60, things come off the rails. How do we recover from that? And how do we become the good king, like our king, Jesus, is? And what is he trying to do? How is he helping us recover from loss? Back to Joseph, we talked about, but the whole idea of what you intended for evil, what the enemy has been working for evil, God is making good. God.
Romans 8:28.
And that is part of what we want to share as we continue these conversations about the significance of recovering from how the enemies come to bring that curse over us. You're on your own. No, you're not.
No, you're not. Michael, one of the things we love to do at Zoweh, as you know, as you've led us so well, is create environments for people to experience belovedness, to experience redemptive communities, etc. And if you guys go to our website, zoweh.org, and at the top, go to our community section. And one of the great resources that we have is a redemptive community sheet. And some of you guys have found that before. If you'll go there, and it says redemptive community, so it's general, but it is redemptive boyhood. If you just, all you got to do is change the title, right? Redemptive marriage, redemptive masculine brotherhood. We
Friendship,
have it under, friendships and deep friendships. So I would encourage you to go find that resource. It's really, really good to help you set an environment that will definitely change your life, change your world.
Yeah, we want to continue, like you said, Greg, to shape some environments for people to get away with God and recover their masculinity, recover their femininity, and get everything out of the way that's in the way from them being the beloved sons and being the beloved daughters that they are.
That's right.
No doubt. Hey, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. And we want to encourage you, if you will, ask you to go to iTunes or your podcast platform and rate and review us, share the podcast with others. We'd love to hear your story. Like Greg said, send us an email at exploringmore@zoweh.org. Just so thankful that you've been on this journey with us through the stages of the masculine journey. Hope you'll continue on listening with us. Join in with us, and thank you again for being on the journey with us. We'll see you next week.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the life of more by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.